Hi, we're going to cover how to pressure test Volvo Penta outdrive. So let's say that this is joined and there's supposed to be lube sharing between these two units here. That's the upper unit, lower unit. One easy way, the easiest way, would be to get this pump and this pump. This one, you need both. Now this one's missing this yellow part because I took it and put it over here. So out of this whole thing, you're only gonna use that yellow part and a piece of hose from this one here. And you can get that part. They have it at Walmart. It's gonna look like that. And let's see. So it might be this one or this one. And then the this pump here, that is this right here. So you can get that at Walmart as well. And it's nearby the auto center, so it should be right in the auto center. And one's called a siphon pump, and the other one's called a gear lube pump for out drives or outboards. So now what you're gonna do is this is gonna come with two hoses. You're gonna hook it up to the rear end, and then notice I pushed one of a piece of that in there. So this yellow piece came with this set, and it actually came attached to this hose. So I cut the hose. Since this one's slightly smaller than this one, just lube a little bit of that smaller one and then slide it in. And once it's in there, it's not gonna come out. The benefit is now you've got something with a thread that'll go in there, and you can pump air into it and it'll hold. Now you just want to put as much air as you want in there, as much as you can compress it. So this should get really hard, and you'll notice that there's air in there, pretty good pressure. A warning: once you're gonna release the pressure, don't open this or take it out of here, because sometimes it'll spurt out oil, spray oil at very high speed towards your eyes. So once you are ready to release pressure, make sure you get this open slightly so it'll start hissing. Just cover it with some Bounty and just let it, or some paper towels, and let it come out slowly. So if you don't want to hook it up here, if you don't want to hook this hose here, the other place it'll fit is right here. So you can also pressure test using this hole. It's the same diameter and the same thread. So you can either hook it up here or hook it on the bottom. I like to hook it on the bottom, and I like to have the outdrive completely dry, because oil is thick and if air is very thin. So if there is any kind of small leak, I'll be able to note it, and I'll hear a hiss either in the front side. So sometimes there'll be a hiss coming from here. I've got no bolts on this, so I've got it semi-loose, but and normally there's a cavitation plate here, or a zinc anode, it's what they call it. This one's broken, so normally there's a piece that looks like this right here covering this. And if you hear a hiss coming from this end, from the front end of it, then you should take off that zinc anode carefully, because they do crack. So you got to take those screws slowly out, carefully out. And if there's a leak or a hiss coming from the front, it's very likely, or even if the leak is coming from, if you see oil coming out of the weep hole, or a hiss coming from here, or you see oil in the exhaust or inside. So if there's oil on the bottom of this or around here, but there is no oil on the seal, then the most likely thing, or almost always, it's gonna be a problem with the seal here. So it's either not tight enough, either the bolts are not tight enough, or there's a problem with the coupling of the seals. They manufacture different types of combinations, and they both look identical, but sometimes they'll put grooves on the upper, or sometimes they'll put groove on the lower. So what happens is, if you end up getting an upper unit with a groove and a lower unit with a groove, it's gonna leak. So you'll have to put seals on both of them, The groove only goes on the one that has the seal goes where the groove is, but I'll show you what happens there. So once you compress it, you'll definitely hear a hiss. Once you put enough air in there, you'll start hearing a hiss. And let's see, if everything is pressurized and there's nothing coming out of anywhere, there's no oil or anything coming out of anywhere, what you want to do is spray some water, soapy water right there. And as it is pressurized, you want to rotate the shaft a little bit and see if bubbles form. So that's the best way to find out if there is a leak with the prop shaft seal. Sometimes fishing line will get in there and it will leak. So once that happens, you got to replace it. It is if it's seized up, it is sometimes even impossible to take it out. So I hope that that's not the case. But places that it might leak might be that seal with the soapy water. That part sometimes doesn't hiss. So the only way to sure know that it's leaking or not, don't do it with oil, because oil is thick, so it might leak very slowly and you won't notice it. But pressurize the inside without oil as much as you can, and then soapy water, rotate it. Also, I would recommend spraying in there or putting soapy water in there, because there is also an O-ring, a big O-ring right down here. So that assembly, that carrier, has a seal here and it has an O-ring right around here, right around the whole part. So it could also be leaking from there. Actually, I think the seal's around here, somewhere on the mid side. And I've seen, it's rare, but I've had one unit that was leaking from the very inside, and it was rather weird. But I had to take the whole carrier for that. So when I do test for the seals, I usually put the lower unit with the shaft pointing up. So I just have the shaft pointing up, and I put soapy water there, so it sits there, and then the soapy water will also sit in there, so I'll be able to see if there's bubbles or not. When I said pressurize it as much as you can, of course by hand. Don't hook it up to like 100 psi compressor or anything like that, because you know we're talking about maybe 15, I would say 15-20 psi is what we're looking for. It's what it might expect. I wouldn't put too much pressure on it, because I mean the seals are rated for a certain maximum. So if you do put 100 psi, they're going to release the air somehow, because that's not what they're rated for. So yeah, just pump it by hand and you'll be able to find out. Sometimes it leaks out of here if it's not tight, bolted with the right pressure. It might leak here. Sometimes the upper unit will leak from here. That's also because it's not bolted enough. So if the bolts are not if they're not tight enough or they're uneven, it will hiss from the top. So but again, if it is coming out of the weep hole, there is nothing down here. There is no purpose for that. That just happens to be a cavity in the case. There's a hole there. When the boat goes in the water, water goes in there, and then when the boat comes out of the water, that holds the sign to make the water just leave that cavity. Okay, so if oil got in there, if oil's leaving that hole, then that means oil is coming from here and going in there. That's the only explanation for that. This goes nowhere. Let's see. So that's it. This is pretty straightforward. I'm not gonna pump this unit because I've got all my spaces loaded up, and I don't really have the setup for that. But I'm gonna take this apart and show you the setup with the seals, and show you why some units will require 2 of this big seals. All right. Okay, so I've got this thing apart and I'm trying to set it up here so I can show you. Alright, so this is the upper part. Notice this thing and then this groove right here. So there's a groove here and there is no seal in that groove, right? And then this one, we've got a groove in the lower unit as well, and that one has a seal installed on it. And then you've got this seal here. That's always the case. This is normal, and this should be normal too. But what's not normal here is that you've got the upper unit has a groove, but it's got no seal. So this is not gonna mate properly with that. Once you put this thing here, it's gonna lose pressure always. It's never gonna seal because there's a groove here that's not being covered, so that seal's just gonna slide in there, and it's really not gonna do anything. So if you do have a groove on both units, you're gonna have to put a seal in there, and it's the same seal that goes here. You're just gonna double seal it pretty much. Some people use silicone, but I don't like doing that. So once you put this seal here, or actually you could even put it over here, you double seal this one. Once you mount it up and slide it in there, this seal will cover the groove that's up here, and then this second seal is going to cover the groove on the bottom, and it's going to seal. If you don't have double seals on the ones that have, I mean, you can notice that this is supposed to be like that. Some units are just made that way. I don't know why Volvo decided to do this and not have all of them be the same. So for example, this one with the seal on the bottom mated originally, or would have mated normally with something like this. So this is another upper unit. I notice this one, it doesn't have a groove. It has a little taper, but it has no groove. Notice there's a black little line right here. That's where the seal was sitting on the lower unit. So once you put the lower unit up against this, that would have sealed right there. And I've seen this happen. There's some lower units that don't have the seal, some upper units have the seal, and vice versa. The problem is when you try to make two units that have, or are supposed to both have seals, or you see that groove on both, then you have to end up putting that seal on both. I would say if you've got everything set up with the seals and everything and it's still leaking, it's likely that there's some scum or something over here, because you can notice if there's even a little tiny, if this is not smooth and there's a little pebble or something in here, or a little piece of silicone from somebody else that used the unit before you, it might leave a gap right near it and it's gonna leak. So I would make sure that this is as smooth as possible so that it mates, or at least this area. So this little area right here, that should be smooth, and where it mates here, it should be smooth as well if you want to clean that as best as you can. It's pretty straightforward. There's really, as long as you have a seal on the groove, on each groove, so as long as you're covered here and you're covered there, it should not leak. Like I said, some lower units don't have a seal right here. I've seen those. And then this one would have a seal and then this one wouldn't. That's why they do it this way. I'm not sure why they flip back and forth sometimes. I think that covers the issues there. I don't know if I'm forgetting something, but I think that's it. Yeah, sometimes the upper units, they have an extra spot where they sometimes leak. Sometimes they leak from here. If they leak at very high pressures, that's not a big deal. But if they're leaking at low pressure, so if you just started pumping it and it starts hissing out of here, then that's an issue. If you end up putting 15, 20, 30 psi on it and it leaks out of here, like I said, those seals are not rated for that high pressure, so it might leak at very high pressure. That's normal. That does cover it. I have seen this issue a lot. So the issue where both units have a groove and then only one seal is on here is one of the main reasons why these things leak. And then the second most thing that leaks that I've seen is either the prop shaft seal, which is something I specifically test before buying boats or parts. I make sure that the prop shaft is not leaking, because again, if the carrier is seized, that sometimes it could be impossible to remove. So that could be the loss of the whole lower unit if it is leaking. I just don't. I make sure that's covered, because pretty much all the other seals you can replace. Everything else is pretty much gaskets and O-rings. But if the prop shaft seal is damaged, that could be impossible to fix, really.